In yesterday's lecture, we have discussed impact of human population growth on environment. We have seen how increasing human population has put a stress on these resources, that is agriculture. For meeting the needs of the growing population, the forests are cleared in order to cultivate food crops. Deforestation has its own consequences. Then also, to feed such a huge population, intensive farming methods are used. This addition of fertilizers, pesticides become increasingly used. Then freshwater source, we have also seen that the freshwater sources are less than the marine water sources. Again, there is water scarcity faced all over the world. So 40% of the population faces water scarcity. We have looked at a report. Then there is pollution of air, water and soil. Increasing human population, increased use of automobiles, there is development of industries, so therefore there will be increased instances of air pollution. Water pollution also increases, and soil pollution also. Soil is polluted by the various chemicals and the fertilizers that are used in the agriculture. Then global warming and ozone layer depletion, increased emissions of greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, then nitrous oxides, particulate matter. All of these are responsible for global warming, increasing the Earth's temperature. Subsequently, they are causing ozone layer depletion. Then there is the impact is that there is extinction of some species. Why the species become extinct? Basically, they cannot adapt to the changing climatic conditions, therefore they perish. Then we have discussed the impact of impact on human health and environment, impact of human population growth on human health and environment. We have seen that there is economic disparity between the developed nations and the developing nations. So when such thing is there, the developing countries, if their population increases, they are unable to provide resources at a better to their population. They are not able to cater the needs of such growing population. Therefore, there are increased instances of communicable diseases. See, the quality of food is degraded, and therefore the nutrient quality of food is degraded, and therefore there are increased instances of diseases. Then we have seen that certain pests and vectors of various disease, they become common, and also pathogens, they multiply and new strains of pathogens come into picture. So that has put a stress on the countries with respect to diseases. Then we have looked at the resettlement and rehabilitation of persons. We have discussed what is the difference between resettlement and rehabilitation. That resettlement is just change in geographical location and providing basic infrastructure to the affected families. But rehabilitation means empowerment of those affected families. Empowerment means what? They have to be given a source of livelihood. They also have to be culturally assimilated in the place where they have been shifted. So that is rehabilitation. Then what are the causes of rehabilitation? In India, why rehabilitation and resettlement of people is observed? The major cause is developmental projects. So if the government wants to make any dam or a bridge or a road such as highway or railway track, it tries to clear up the forest or a piece of land where people are residing. Now, in that case, people have to be shifted. Then, political conflict. Political conflict, we have seen this in case of the refugees, the people migrating from other countries. So, if there are wars, the place where they have been shifted might not have an arable land. Arable land means what? Cultivable land. So that is a challenge to them, that how to earn livelihood. Okay. Then insufficient economic support. Many a times, see, government sanctions the money, but it doesn't reach the people who are affected. So that is also a challenge. Then cultural assimilation. Cultural assimilation, again, the place where they have been shifted, people over there, they might have a different culture. Particularly, this problem is faced by tribal population or tribal people, because the people living in the cities or the rural area, for that matter, also they have a different culture when compared to tribes. So the cultural assimilation is a challenge in resettle resettlement and rehabilitation. Then we have discussed the case study of Sardar Sarovar project. That this project was done on river Narmada, one of the largest rivers in India, and it had rehabilitation of large number of people had to be done in order to build this dam. So there was an agency established for providing a relief packages, or economic packages to the affected families. Also, we have seen that a review of this project was done. That families were asked whether they were happy or not. Most of the families said that they are not happy because the new land which they have been given, it is not the quality is not good, the infrastructure facility is not good. So they had some or the other problem. Yes, today we are going to discuss about disaster management. So let us first begin by defining what is a disaster. See, disaster is a sudden accident or a natural catastrophe that causes great damage or loss of life. Now, there are serious disruptions to the functioning of a community that exceeds its capacity to cope up using its resources. See, it is a sudden accident, therefore, people are not, first of all, aware of it. Okay, nowadays it is possible to predict a disaster because we have those systems. But earlier, or for that matter, many of the disasters cannot be predicted. So there is loss of life. Many people die in the disasters, and there is loss of property also. Their homes are destroyed. Their agricultural land gets destroyed, if any. And what happens is that a proper functioning community in that area, which is settled already, okay, their function is disrupted, and it is disrupted to an extent that they have lost the capacity to cope using their own resources. That means using their own money they cannot bring everything back. Okay, so this is how the disaster has consequences on human life. Okay, the effects are such that the people themselves cannot be seen to rise again, or they cannot cope up with the effects of disaster. So there has to be policies to help these people. There have to be economic support which should be given to these people. And then let us see now what are the causes of disaster. There are two causes of disaster. First is natural disaster. One can be a natural disaster or a man-made disaster. Now natural disasters are those which are caused by nature. Okay. Which are these disasters? Earthquakes, then cyclones, thunderstorms, hurricanes. These disasters are not in our hand. We cannot control these disasters, isn't it? These are caused by natural events, and we can mitigate them, but we cannot stop them, isn't it? We can, however, mitigate them into a limited extent. We cannot stop them from occurring. Okay. Then these disasters are caused by nature, but they do lead to loss of life. They cause injury to the health of the people. Then there is property damage. There is loss of livelihood of these people. Then there is social and environmental disruption of the people. So loss of livelihood is a major drawback to the people who are living, because once there is loss of livelihood, how is the survival affected? Then social and environmental disruption. Many a times people who are affected by these disasters have to be relocated to some other place. Now when they are relocated to other place, the society in the new place is different, so there are social, and also the environment where these disasters are happening is completely degraded. So there are social and environmental disruptions. Then there are man-made disasters. These are caused as a result of human activities. That means man is responsible for these disasters. Some of the examples are road accidents, okay, very common nowadays. Then nuclear blasts. Nuclear blasts, particularly in the wars. In the Second World War, you might have heard or be aware of the fact that the attack on the Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So the nuclear technology was used over there, and the effects of those nuclear blasts are still seen in the people of Japan. So that is a man-made disaster. Wars are man-made disasters, okay, because they are caused by man. Wars will always disrupt the functioning of a society. They will cause collapse of the structures which are made by the country. So it is indeed a man-made disaster. Then chemical leaks. Chemical leaks usually happen in the factories. So Bhopal gas tragedy, you all must be aware, okay, where there was leakage of the gas. So in the chemical plant. So here humans are mainly responsible for these disasters. Then cyber attacks. Nowadays cyber attacks are a huge disasters. They sent you a malware or a file, and you just open the file and the entire data of your computer gets hacked. So cyber attacks are increasingly becoming a disaster nowadays. So disaster have to be managed. In India, we have an authority for that matter, which is known as National Disaster Management Authority. Okay, so this is responsible for managing various types of disasters in India. Now, what is disaster management? First of all, disaster management is a process of effectively preparing and responding to the disaster. So any country has to be prepared and should respond to the disaster effectively. That constitutes the disaster management. We have an authority, that is National Disaster Management Authority, which strategically organizes the resources available in the country, and it lessens the harm that might be caused by disaster. Okay, it is an agency of Ministry of Home Affairs. Okay, so National Disaster Management Authority comes under Ministry of Home Affairs, and Prime Minister is its ex officio chairperson. Okay, now all the planning and organization of resources, training of persons is organized by the authority. Now, in India, Disaster Management Act was passed in 2005, and National Disaster Management Authority is established under this act, that is Disaster Management Act. National Disaster Management Authority is responsible for framing the policies. Okay, all the policies with respect to the disaster management are framed by the National Disaster Management Authority. It also lays down the guidelines and coordinates the State Disaster Management Authority. National Disaster Management Authority is for the entire country. That means it has jurisdiction or powers over the entire country. Every state has a State Disaster Management Authority. So, what should be the policies of State Disaster Management Authority? Then guidelines also. Then they have to coordinate the various state disaster management authorities. So all of this is done by National Disaster Management Authority. See how a disaster management approach works. There are 4 phases in it. First is mitigation. Mitigation means what? To reduce the severity of the disaster. See, we cannot avoid a natural disaster. We can avoid a man-made disaster. Okay, up to certain extent. But natural disasters, we cannot avoid it. We can reduce its severity by mitigating. So, by preventing any future emergencies or minimizing their effects, we can definitely mitigate a disaster. So mitigation means what? Reducing the severity of a disaster. So how can we reduce the severity? First of all, we can prevent the future emergencies which are in our hand. Okay, or we can minimize their effects. So this can be done. Then preparedness. Preparedness means one should be prepared to handle an emergency. See, you might have heard about the floods. For the past 2-3 years, there have been floods in the country. Okay, the areas which have not experienced floods were experiencing floods, particularly the Kolhapur floods, if you are aware of it. And the southern states, they are experiencing floods for quite some time in the last few years. Now, such a disaster or flood is a natural disaster. So now the government itself should be prepared to handle such emergency. Then the people who are living over there, they have to be prepared to handle such emergency. Okay, anything can happen. So the management authority of a particular state has to be ready with the persons which are specialized in managing the disaster, providing the relief to the people who are affected. So this is how the preparedness has to be there. Then response, countering safely to an emergency. Now if the disaster has happened already, okay, suppose an earthquake has happened in a particular area, how safely we can counter to that emergency, how safely we can manage that disaster is a response. Okay, safely means the people who are going there to handle the emergency, they also have to be protected. In addition to the people who are affected, they have to be safely removed from the area where the disaster has happened. So that is response. Then recovery. Recovery means what? Okay, now disaster has happened, the area has faced the disaster. What can be done to improve from that emergency or disaster? What can be done to give those people a hope to live? So one, the state can give them some economic packages, okay, or can provide them some source of livelihood in some other areas. They can give them houses in other areas. So all of these can be done. So that is recovery, and how the area can be cleared up, okay, and again any infrastructure has to be built on the same area. So that is a recovery. Okay, so approach to disaster management has four phases. First is mitigation, that is reducing the severity of any disaster. Preparedness, the agencies which are handling a disaster, and if people are also involved, they should be prepared to handle it. Response, safely people who are affected by the disasters have to be removed from the place. Then recovery, once the disaster has happened, how effectively the people are rehabilitated or the area is again developed. All of this falls under recovery. Okay, so mitigation is one, preparedness is second, response is third, and fourth is recovery. Then nowadays you can see there is a lot of role of the information and communication technologies. These play a significant role in disaster prevention, mitigation, response, and recovery. What are information and communication technologies? So these are nothing but the technologies that will give you warning about a disaster way before a disaster has happened. Okay, so they provide timely, predictable, and effective information to the government agencies. We also have such technologies to predict a disaster. Okay, so the government is pre-informed. You might have heard about this in coastal areas. If a cyclone is developing in the Bay of Bengal or Arabian Sea, then the warnings are given forehand, or the people are made aware of the cyclone, that it will hit this coast, whether it is eastern coast or the western coast. If it is a cyclone developing in the Bay of Bengal, then it will hit the eastern coast of India. Which states will be affected? What will be the speed of that storm, that is cyclone, and up to what distance it will travel on the mainland, that is from the coast, then for how many kilometers the effects will be seen. All of these are predictable nowadays because of the technologies available. So people are made aware, or they are informed prior to a disaster that might happen. And so what is the use that government can plan to relocate such people? Beforehand, the government will shift all the villagers living in the coast to the interiors of the country. Okay, they have the facility to do that. Then once the cyclone has passed, the area which is affected, it is again redeveloped. Okay, so all of this is possible because information and communication technologies, they provide timely, predictable, and effective information. So rescue operations and decision making process becomes effective, isn't it? Even they can provide information. If a disaster is happening, they can provide information. Suppose flood is happening, they can provide that what is the depth of water at this place, what is the depth of water at some other place. So they can compare where to navigate. People can compare where to navigate and where to go. So this is how it helps in rescue operations and decision making process uh, at the government level. What are these technologies? First is remote sensing. What is remote sensing? It is nothing but detecting and monitoring the physical characteristics of an area. Okay, detecting and monitoring the physical characteristics of an area by using the satellites. Okay, it is basically by measuring the reflection and emitted radiation. So government is making use of it. Then global positioning system, satellite communications, everything this is basically because of the satellite communications. Okay, all of the information regarding a disaster is made available before a disaster can happen. So Indian Space Research Organization, ISRO, has played a vital role in this area. Yeah, that is disaster management, for providing timely information. Having understood disaster management, let us now discuss flood. But before flood, there is also one point left in disaster management, that public awareness and training also has to be done. See, people living in the coastal areas, they have to be made aware that they are going to face the consequences of cyclone or tsunami if it happens. Okay, then excessive rainfall, they are going to face the consequences of that. People, if they are living in a mountainous region, they should be made aware that anytime landslides can occur if they are located in the landslide prone zone. We have different earthquakes zones, okay, areas which are prone to earthquakes in our country. So people have to be made aware that this is a high earthquake zone, or this region will face landslide in the future. So public awareness is also important. Then training has to be given. National Disaster Management Authority, it has a team of people which mitigates or which helps, also helps in rescue operation. So these people have to be trained properly themselves, how to rescue people if it is a flood which has happened in a particular area, then how to deal with the flood. Okay, so training is also important. Now also remember that there has to be coordination between different departments of the government. So there has to be inter-department coordination, isn't it? Department of Communications should coordinate with the this disaster management authority of the particular state. Okay, then there have the, if flood relief packages have to be given, then again the food agriculture department comes into picture, because they have to sanction the amount of food that can be given. Also economic department of any state, that also has to sanction a particular amount for that particular uh, managing that disaster. But we have a fund under this National Disaster Management Act. We have a fund for mitigating the disasters. There is a separate fund set up for that. Okay, then training of the officials and staff at various government departments of the state. This is utmost important, because at the last they are going to carry out the rescue operations. So they have to be trained how to deal with the rescue operations, and how to handle rescue operations to deal with the disasters. Okay, now let us look at the flood. What is flood? It is nothing but unusual presence of water on land to a depth which affects normal activities. This is very common in the coastal cities, isn't it? But for the past few years, even the interiors of the country are facing floods. Okay, this is because of the overflowing of the rivers. So flood is nothing but presence of water on land to a depth which affects the normal activities. Can you see how it has affected normal activities? People living in those houses, they have been shifted. In the right side image, you can see that people who are living in the houses, they have been brought to uh, another part, and they are looking at their house, because it is all under the water. Okay, So their normal activities are affected. They cannot carry out their daily activities, isn't it? Because their houses are all in the water. Then on the left side also you can see a city, flood in a city. You can see how they are moving their vehicles in the flood water. So therefore the normal activities get affected. What are the causes of flood? Again, just we have discussed that there are disasters are man-made and natural. Here also the causes are man-made causes, that is anthropogenic causes, and natural causes. So the man-made causes of flood, it includes deforestation. Deforestation, why it is a major cause? See, clearing of forest, what will happen? There will be soil erosion. So the surface, there will be increased instances of surface runoff. Of what? Soil also will be carried out in that water. Then that soil will get deposited in the river beds. Okay, deposition of the soil in the river beds will increase the height of the river bed. Okay, that is the distance from the bottom. So river bed will become shallow, or the river will become shallow. Water, the amount of water it can hold will become less. Then this water will flow outside to the settlements which are present in the vicinity of the river. So that is responsible for flooding. So one cause leading to other cause. Okay, deforestation, then soil erosion, increased surface runoff. So there is deposition of soil and the other particles in the riverbed. So riverbed becoming the rivers becoming shallow and excessive. They are not able to hold excessive water. Water then enters. There is flooding of the river. Water then enters the human settlements in the vicinity of the river. Second is urbanization. Urbanization, why urbanization? See, the concrete structures that are formed or found in the cities, particularly the roads and the other infrastructures, what they will do, they will prevent the infiltration of rainwater into the ground. Okay, that is passing of rainwater into the ground. So in that case, what will happen? There is no seepage available. There will be water on the streets. So absence of vegetation cover in the cities to interrupt rainwater, that will also increase runoffs which are flowing into the river. That results in the flooding of the river if any river is there in the vicinity. So these are some of the man-made causes. Then global warming. Global warming, I told you, there is an increased temperature of the earth. At some places extreme temperatures are there, and extreme drought is experienced at some places, and at some places there is extreme rainfall. Okay, so increased instances of higher rainfall of short duration, this is responsible for causing flood. And because of the warming, so at some places there is melting of the ice. So again, this water which is melted from the ice, it will flow down into the river, and then there is flood, increased instances of flood. Having discussed the man-made causes, what are the natural causes of flood? Excessive rainfall in tropical areas is one of the reasons why the rivers overflow in these areas. Then there are storm surges. Storm surges means what? See, coastal areas which are having a low lying relief. So strong winds, what do they do? They raise the waves in these areas, waves of ocean in these areas to an exceptionally high level, and such waves, they crash into the coast and flood the lands which are present adjacent to the coast. So this is the storm surge. Then second causes melting of snow. Melting of snow happens in the summer, but now it is accelerated because of the global warming. So melting of snow in the spring releases large amount of water into the rivers, and these rivers, they overflow. So because of the melting of snow, the rivers overflow. Then the third cause is earthquakes. Okay, earthquakes, what in the oceans, they trigger tsunamis. Tsunamis are a series of waves in water. They are caused by displacement of large amounts of water. See, if you see the height of a tsunami wave, it is much higher than the regular wave of the ocean, and they can reach to a height of 100 feet also. So tsunamis, they cause a greater damage to the coastal areas. So these were some of the natural causes of floods. What can one do in the mitigation of the flood? First is the structural methods. See, one can build dams, reservoirs to hold the water of the river. Then channel management can be done. Okay, Embank- em- embankments can be created. Embankments means what? See, a wall or a bank of earth, either of the earth or a stone, can be built to prevent the river flooding an area. You might have seen this in our city also. Okay, there are walls erected at various places, if because there are some adjacent human settlements present in the city. So these settlements are very close to the river flowing through the city. Therefore, a wall of high walls of stone are built. So this can be done. The wall can also be of the earth to prevent flooding an area. Then water control methods. See, increasing forest and vegetation cover in an area can definitely prevent floods. Then watershed management. Watershed management, what is a watershed? It is an area from where water sources drain into the river. Okay, so managing the watershed, that various other sources of water, they can unite and they can be drained into a particular river. So that is watershed management. Then flood proofing. Flood proofing means what? There have to be structural and non-structural changes in the buildings. Particularly, people have those people who have buildings near the coast. Okay, they can introduce this structural changes in the building, such as installation of watertight shields for their windows and doors. So watertight windows and doors can be done in order to prevent the in order to mitigate the flood. Then non-structural methods. What are the non-structural methods in mitigation of flood? First is that one can forecast flood before. Flood warnings can be given to the people living on the coast or adjacent to the rivers. Emergency preparedness systems can be established, and if a flood has happened, then flood relief operations can be carried out, or giving flood relief to the people. In this image you can see some of the methods of mitigating the floods. So one is establishing the rain gardens, then modification of the channel of the river, Then flood proofing. Okay, just now I've told you about the watertight doors and windows. So structural changes. Then one can build reservoirs or dam. Storm surge gates. This can be done on the coastal areas. And of course, habitat restoration. Once the habitat has been destroyed by the flood, it can be restored. So these are some of the methods of mitigating the flood. And also plan and policy insurance. This is very important. A government can give insurance, or for that matter any private agency also can frame an insurance policy for those who are affected by the flood. See, in cities, this problem is because there is no drainage, proper drainage for the rainwater to seep into the ground. Everywhere there is concrete, roads or buildings. So there have to be proper seepage created, and also managing the watershed is important. Okay, then people who are living in the areas adjacent to the river, they have to be protected by building some stone wall or wall of the earth. So let us now revise what we have discussed in terms of flood as a disaster. What is flood? It is nothing but unusual presence of water on land to a depth which affects normal activities. Causes of flood are anthropogenetic and natural causes. So, man-made causes of flood, these include deforestation. Deforestation means clearing of forest. If forests are cleared, then there will be increased soil erosion. Increased soil erosion, what will happen? There is increased surface runoff of from the from an area. So all of this will be deposited in the riverbed. The rivers will become shallow. They will not be able to hold water that they were able to hold previously, and therefore there is flooding when these rivers overflow. Okay. Then urbanization, because there are concrete structures everywhere, that is the roads and the buildings, there is absence of seepage for the water. So water will not enter the ground, and then there will be increased instances of flood. Then we have discussed about the global warming, that because of global warming there are higher rainfall of short duration, and also extreme rainfalls in some areas. So that is responsible for flooding of the rivers. Melting of the ice, again increased warming, therefore increased instances of melting of ice, or a higher proportion of ice is melt, so there are increased instances of flood in that case. Then we have discussed what are the natural causes of flood. Natural causes of flood, these include excessive rainfall in the tropical areas. Okay, and because of which the rivers in the tropics they overflow. Then storm surges in the coastal areas, particularly those with the low-lying relief. What happens is there strong winds, they raise the waves of the ocean to an exceptionally high level, and these crash into the coast and flood the land. Then melting snow. Melting snow means, see, in the spring, in the temperate regions, what happens? The snow is melt, and this releases large amount of water into the rivers, causing these rivers to overflow their banks. Then earthquakes. Earthquakes are known to trigger tsunamis in the ocean, and tsunamis are huge waves. They can reach a height of around 100 feet because they displace large volumes of water, and tsunamis they affect coastal areas. Then we have discussed about the mitigation strategies. What can be done? Structural and non-structural methods can be applied. Structural method means what? See, the dams can be built, reservoirs can be built so as to hold the waters of the river. Then channel management can be done, river channel management can be done, embankments can be made. Embankments means what? There can be walls uh, of earth or stone constructed so as to prevent the flooding of the river in an open area. Then water control methods like increasing the forest and vegetation cover. Watershed management. The watershed is an area from where various water sources they drain into a single river channel, so that can be managed. Then non-structural methods, it includes flood proofing methods. Flood proofing like installation of watertight shields for windows and dams. Okay, watertight shields can be installed for windows and dams. One can also uh, these are structural methods. Okay, non-structural methods include like flood forecasting, having the warning about the flood, then the emergency preparedness system. Okay, all of these fall into the non-structural methods. Flood relief, that means all the economic packages that are offered to the people who are affected, all of it falls under the flood relief. So that was all about the today's lecture. We have discussed here what is a disaster. Basically, disaster is a sudden accident or a natural catastrophe that causes great damage or loss of life. It seriously affect the functioning of a community and its capability to cope using its own resources. That means there has to be some help given to these people in order to bring their life to normal. Then we have discussed what are the causes of disaster, that there are natural causes and there are man-made causes. So natural disasters are caused by nature. Okay, these earthquakes, cyclones, hurricanes, thunderstorms, all of these are natural disasters. Man-made disasters are caused as a result of human activities. So we have discussed about road accidents, then nuclear blasts, chemical leaks, cyber attacks, wars. All of these are the man-made disasters. Then we talked about what is disaster management, that it is a process of effectively preparing and responding to disaster. We have an agency, that is National Disaster Management Authority, for that purpose. This agency comes under Ministry of Home Affairs and Prime Minister is its ex officio chairperson. Then we have discussed that there are 4 steps in disaster management. First is mitigation, that means reducing the severity. Second is preparedness. An area, state or a country has to be prepared to handle the emergency. Response, if there is an emergency, how safely the response has been given. Fourth, recovery. Okay, once the disaster has happened, how people and the country has cope up with that disaster, that is recovery. Nowadays we have discussed the role of information and communication technology. Particularly we have discussed Indian Space Research Organization has played a vital role in providing information about the disasters way before they happen. So timely prediction and information is important for the government agencies to manage the disasters. Then public itself has to be made aware. In an area, if they are living, they have to be made aware that this area is prone to earthquake, this area is prone to flood. Then training of the personals involved, those people who are involved in the rescue operations of the state, they have to be trained well to effectively handle a particular disaster. Then, having understood the disaster management, we discussed a natural disaster, which is flood. That flood is unusual presence of water on the land to a depth which affects the normal human activity. We have seen the causes of flood, that is the man-made cause and the natural cause. And also the mitigation strategies of